Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're talking about coffee grinder terminology and technology. A lot's changed over the last few years and I just want to share with you the main differences when you're looking at buying a new grinder. We'll be looking at things like Burr Types, being either conical or flat burr. We're looking at the dosing mechanisms, whether it be time-based delivery or weight-based delivery. We'll look at that goal of stepless versus stepped, the ultimate goal of zero retention that people want to look at when they're grinding their beans, or is single dose or a hopper grinder the best outcome for you? Anyway, stick about as I deep dive into the world of grinders. So in front of me, I have three grinders that you would commonly see in your searches at the moment looking for a newest grinder. We've got the All Ground Sense, which is a weight-based grinder. We've got the DF54, which is a single dose grinder. And we've got the Breville Smart Grinder Pro, which is a hopper grinder. So entry level, medium, and in the higher range for the home. So we'll talk about the technologies and how different these are and whether they're the right option for you. And I don't have these grinders in front of me to recommend either one as a recommendation. It's just a way for me to reference different types of technology. So let's just talk about burrs first, because that's the thing that people start to think about. Do they want a conical burr or a flat burr? And essentially burrs are what make the beans from a whole bean into a grind particle size. And that can be done by the design of a conical burr or a flat burr. So essentially the conical burr is a cone-shaped burr that allows the beans for gravity to fall from the top through down to the bottom. And because there are two cones, it will crunch the beans at the start, and by the time it ends out the bottom of the cone, it will be a finer grind setting. A flat burr grinder is like two donut discs essentially, and they sit on top of each other. The beans fall into the center hole, and with centrifugal force, they're pushed out through the blades into the outer ring of those burrs. They're then swept into the dosing chamber and out into your portafilter handle. So they work very differently. There's a couple of pros and a couple of cons between each one. The Breville Smart Grinder Pro here is a conical burr set. The DF54 is a 54mm flat burr, as it says. And in the All Ground Sense, we have a 64mm dark tea burr. I know that sounds pretty techie, but we'll get back to that in a sec. So essentially, with a conical burr set, we tend to find flavors that are a little bit more bolder and not as refined, less acidity. And if you're looking at a darker roast or a body style coffee, it's definitely something that you would look at buying. If you're looking for clarity, some more fruity flavors, or getting some better acidity, or really working on balancing your taste profile of your coffee, you would probably look at a flat burr. And the reason being is that with a conical burr set, we can grind a lot quicker. The RPM speed of the motor is a lot slower, and the volume will come out much faster into the portafilter handle. So because it is so quick, there's less refinement in that quality of the grind particle size. With your flat burrs, it does take a little bit longer to allow the burrs to work properly, and you'll find that the motor speeds are a lot higher, and essentially they're running at a faster RPM. So that will allow a cleaner, crisper flavor, but the trade-off to that is a little bit of heat that might be applied because there's more friction on that grinding process. So typically in entry-level grinders, it's a lot cheaper and easier to produce a conical burr set because gravity is just feeding those beans straight down, they grind quicker, and we don't have to have a higher torque motor to make that grinding process work. But in the flat burrs, we're very cautious about heat and the time, and so we're adding a lot more technology in to get those refinements in flavors. In the DF54 here, in a flat burr, they normally come with a standard stainless steel burr set, and compared to the dark tea burrs here in the Fiorenzato All Ground, we've got far greater technology in the angles, the blades shapes for that grinding, but also it's a titanium and dark tea coated burr, which basically reduces friction, reduces heat, and increases the life of those burrs. So that higher speed, focusing on a good burr set will definitely get you a better outcome in flavor. And so that's a bit of a general view on the different types of burrs that you can have. Now, we were fortunate enough to recently go to the Mazza factory, who specialize in conical burr sets, and they've got some pretty amazing stuff. So check out the video that we do when we tour their factory on specific conical advancements, because they reckon they make the best conical burrs in the world. So the next thing to consider is how beans are falling into those burr sets. We can see here that we have two hopper grinders and we have a single dose grinder. A hopper grinder standardly would have a lid and a hopper on the top, essentially, that we can fill up and allow those beans to use gravity to continually fall through onto the burr sets. You can seal them off and maybe put a week's worth of coffee in there, and that's pretty convenient just to be able to, walk up with your handle and dose yourself some coffee and get a rough amount into your portafilter handle. And that's basically how a hopper works. You can open and close the slide to maybe change beans, but essentially once the beans are past that hopper slide, you're going to have some beans that will be stuck in those burrs, and they've got to push all the way through the grind chute before they end in the portafilter handle. A single dose grinder essentially is allowing you to weigh out the exact amount of beans that you want into your portafilter handle. You'd pop them in the top. After the grinder has started, you've got a bellows here which allow you to pump, essentially pushing any of those grind particles out into your portafilter handle and essentially leaving no grinds inside that grinder. If you put 20 grams of beans in the top, you'll end up with 20 grams of beans out the bottom. So which one suits you best? We find that people that are really happy to have one blend to do some milk coffees and maybe an espresso or black every now and then, but they just want that ease of use to be able to get coffee on demand in the morning and not have to think about it, a hopper style grinder is probably the best for you. If you're the person that's going to go on a bit of a journey and have a single origin or a blend, or you may even have a decaf drinker in the family and you need to change rapidly, you could pre-weigh all those beans out into little pots and essentially utilize a single dose grinder. You could then make the fine adjustments for each one of those beans or blends to make sure you can get the best recipe and extraction, and you don't have any wastage at all. So the next thing to consider is stepped or stepless. Now, as those beans fall into those burr sets, you can adjust how close or how far apart the burr sets are. The closer they are together, the finer the grind particle is going to be. The further apart they are, the more coarse they're going to be. And that little tip that everyone forgets about, going coarser speeds up your extraction and going finer slows it down. So what we've got to look at is how fine can we go and how much adjustment do we have on a grinder. Now, something like the All Ground Sense here is a stepped grinder, because as we rotate it, there's a little bearing in there essentially, and you can hear it click. So when the burrs are adjusted, they're going per click. Now, every grinder will tell you what that difference is per click, and I don't know the specifics on the All Ground Sense. And I don't know the same on the Smart Grinder Pro either. But essentially they do have a little dial here, and as you move it, you can hear it clicking. So that is a set point when you can move a dial or the actual burr set that locks into a particular position. A stepless grinder is something like the DF54 here, where we can turn this as much as we like, and we could be half of one of these lines or, further in between any of these positions, and that would be certainly a more microscopic adjustment. Now, you're really only going to find those being an issue if you are nailing your recipe perfect. If you've got the right dose, the right age, and you've got a grind perfectly dialed in, and you might be sitting at 28 seconds and you want to get to 30 seconds, but if you do a stepped change, you might hit 32 seconds. You might not be able to dial it in perfectly. But that's where the stepless allows you to fit in between those parameters of the step on the actual grinder and just nail it perfectly. There are a couple little issues with a grinder that is stepless, is that how do you stop that from moving essentially over time? The DF54 is pretty good in that space, but if you're looking at, say, a Mazza grinder, they have a locking mechanism which you would screw down essentially to hold that top burr set in place, because it's a thread that you're increasing or decreasing to wind up or down the differences between the two burrs. But also a step grinder can have the same problem. Usually a step grinder does have a locking pin that you would hold down and allow an adjustment to happen, and as it locks back up, it sits into that exact step that is allocated for the burrs. I briefly touched on workflow before about how you would use your beans essentially in a hopper or a single dose grinder. So if you want to fill up a hopper, we recommend buying a bigger bag of beans, popping them in so that they're fresh, really looking after those beans in perhaps another storage container so that oxygen doesn't age them quickly, because with a hopper grinder, you will get air on those beans. They will age, and essentially you may need to change your grind settings as those beans get more oxygen and don't expand as much in your extractions. Where if you've got your single dose, essentially you have to plan out all of your beans. You're going to have to store them in little pre-weighed tubs perhaps, and open up and dose individually. So it's going to take maybe a little bit longer to do multiple coffees with a single dose grinder, but you're gonna have a much better accuracy and be able to adjust grinds in between each little dosing pot that you have. So if it's ease you're after and workflow is just gonna be, hey, I'm half asleep and I wake up in the morning and I just need to get that coffee in me to be alive, perhaps a hopper grinder is the way to go. The one tip I give you if you're using a hopper grinder is the first coffee, you want to discard that grind. I know it's a little bit of wastage, but what happens in every grinder from the burst set through to where it falls into your portafilter handle is actually going to have some grind that's sitting in there from the day before. So let's say you're having a coffee today at 7 o'clock in the morning and your last coffee was 7 o'clock yesterday. You've got grind in there that is 24 hours old. It's going to be terrible. By simply purging that out, you're going to have a much better experience first up with a hopper style grinder where you won't have that issue with a single dose because there's no grind left in there after you've used the bellows and pumped it out. So some dosing logic around time-based or weight-based. Now this is something that's pretty exciting. I love weight-based technology because for years we've been trying to teach people to understand time. And even today, this technology has been around for 15 or more years. Baristas still struggle understanding how to change time to get the exact amount of coffee into your portafilter handle, especially when they make any sort of grind adjustment. So just on that, we'll just stick on the time based. So essentially, most grinders will have a single button for a single portafilter or a double button for a double portafilter or double basket. And usually you might have a smaller dose, maybe a 7 gram for a single portafilter and maybe a 20 gram for a double portafilter. And you want to fill that up. But essentially when you hit time, time does not equate to grams of volume in that portafilter handle. So when you're setting your grind, if you're going finer, every revolution of those burst sets is only going to shave a little bit of that bean off. So you actually need more time to fill up your portafilter handle. If you're going coarser, the same revolution will actually grind off more particle size and fill your portafilter handle a lot quicker. So essentially you need less time. Now, a lot of people struggle with understanding that concept, and I get it. The best way to dial in one of these is to forget about the time for now. Just pick a time that you know is going to fill a basket. Keep dialing in, get your grind right. You might have a little bit of wastage, but once you get pretty close to the grind particle size you need for your extraction, just do a manual timer on a stopwatch when you're pressing the button manually, how long it might take for you to fill up that basket. Make sure you're weighing the dose in the basket because that's the best outcome. And if let's say you've got 7 seconds, go back and adjust that preset button to the time that you just worked out, and you're going to be so close to nailing that perfectly every single time when that button's pressed. But if you do make a grind change, you're going to have to add more time if you go finer and less time if you go coarser. Then weight base comes along. How awesome is weight base? Because what it does is it gives you the exact recipe into your portafilter handle when you engage it into the portafilter cradle. It's not time that we're setting on a grinder, it is the grams of weight that we're going to be putting into that handle. So every grind particle size that is coming out of the chute and falling into the portafilter handle is being measured. So if we want 20 grams, it will continue to grind to give us that 20 grams of weight. All we're worrying about then is just changing the grind to match the recipe that we have for our desired outcome, whether it be a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 recipe extraction. And it's very simple. We're just looking for that end time measure to change the fineness or coarseness of the grinder to give us the outcome of the extraction. We don't have to worry because that portafilter will always be filled perfectly. So with all that said, a lot of people still consider about wastage or the zero retention goal. How much are we going to waste in between a bag of coffee, how many extractions are we actually going to get, and how much is going to be tipped down into our knock waste bin because it's not good quality grind? Well, when we look at our hopper grinders, I did mention that there's going to be some of that grind that was left between 7 o'clock today versus 7 o'clock yesterday. So that could be maybe half of your portafilter handle being filled, but essentially you can measure that. Just grab your grinder, tip it all out upside down, and a lot of grind's going to come flying out the front, and weigh that. And that'll give you an idea of how much grind is in the chute and on the outside of your burr set. Once you know that, you can set your single dose button up to clear that in the morning and use your double button for the exact dose that you want in terms of time. If you've got a weight-based grinder, I always set this grinder, because it's the one I have at home, I have a 4 gram purge in the morning for the first button, and then I discard that and I go straight into dosing my 22.5 gram recipe for my portafilter handle. So that's how you deal with zero retention for hoppers. In terms of single dose grinders, whatever you put in is what you get out. So that's the cool thing about a single dose grinder. You can measure that very simply. You have your pre-weighed coffee, you turn your grinder on, you pop the beans in, and once you've got the grind out with your bellows, give it a couple of puffs and you'll see those last fines coming out into your dosing pot or your portafilter handle. And if you re-weigh that, you're gonna be like maybe 0.1, maybe 0.2 of retention inside that grinder. Now don't do that on your very first grind because there are some grinds that do have to fill up those little nooks and crannies in a grinder. Maybe the screw that's holding the flat burr in place, a few little grinds will be in there. But essentially after you get past that first grind, they're gonna be very accurate every single time. So if you're new to the Artisti channel, you won't know that we have over 600 YouTube videos already. I've actually done a video on each one of these individual grinders. So if you're thinking, hey, maybe the Fiorenzato All Ground is the one I've got to look at, or the DF54, or even the Breville Smart Grinder Pro, jump on, check out the video. It'll deep dive into these specific grinders to help you decide if it's the right one for you. I've also got another video around burrs, diving heaps deeper into the coatings on burrs and the differences between larger and smaller flat burrs, and the same with conical burrs. So then that might be another tech video that you can jump into. There's also cleaning videos. There's so much more on the channel, and we certainly appreciate if you can like and subscribe to the channel when you find that video that you absolutely love, and share it with your barista mate or the cafe down the road, because I know there's going to be something that they're going to get out of the channel. Anyway, if you've got any questions, let's start some comments down below in the chat. What grinder do you have? What are you thinking about getting? Has this video helped you decide that maybe single dosing is too much work for you? Are you a bit lazy and you just want that coffee on demand? Anyway, love to see what you're talking about in the comments below. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, everyone. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.